Welcome here to an all-new edition of the Bearcat Breakroom, exclusively on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora in our multimedia marketing partnership with the Binghamton University Bearcats. It is my honor and my privilege to be able to bring you student athletes, coaches, and administration throughout the year with Binghamton University, telling their incredible stories about the people that help make up the community that we love so very much at Binghamton. So with that being said, I am picture in picture with Kyle Borshoff, the head coach of the wrestling team on site at Binghamton University. And being the head wrestling coach, we're going to get into his story about why Binghamton, why wrestling, how he got into all of that, and have some fun here this morning in this edition of the Bearcat Break Room. Kyle, how are you?
I'm good, Dan. Thank you for having me on, and appreciate the opportunity to talk some wrestling here and specifically about Binghamton. So, really appreciative to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got to ask you about your background. Why did you select the specific background that you have for us here today?
In terms of the sport of wrestling itself,
But just the background picture why you chose that.
oh, my background
Yeah,
picture.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. That's a picture of the event center when we competed, I believe, against Penn State University a few years back. So it's been a while now, but we had close to 5,000 fans at the event center for that dual meet. So it was a pretty cool environment, and I think it showcases our sport well and really drives home the point that there is a huge market for wrestling. There's a lot of people that follow the sport, and when we bring in a big team to town, it shows, right? And we got to do more of that. We got to do a better job of putting people in the stands. And I like this picture because it shows that we have the ability to do that.
Yeah, and how, like you said, describing that and putting people in the stands, how do we increase that? How do we, I mean, obviously today we're putting a spotlight on wrestling with a lot of different purposes to why we're doing that, but how do we accentuate this? How do we build it out? How do we reach out to someone who's never been to a wrestling match before? In your opinion, what can we do to engage maybe some of those newcomers to get them to a match at Binghamton University?
Yeah, I think the important thing to realize is that wrestling's a fun sport to watch, even if you don't quite understand what's going on. And when I moved here to Binghamton, I got involved with a group of friends, people that had never really watched wrestling before or been a part of the sport growing up, and they started coming to matches just because they knew me. And it's interesting to listen and talk with people that have never been to wrestling and hear about why they enjoy the event, right? And it's a fast-paced event. Matches are fairly quick. We're really usually in that 90-minute to 2-hour time frame. You get a ton of action. There's a lot of unique things that are happening in our sport just because of the nature of how you win and score. So it's a bit different than anything else that you're going to see here on campus. I think that wrestling as a sport continues to grow. We do a good job at the high school level. This past year, I think the numbers were released that we had over 300,000 high school participants in wrestling, which is the highest it's been in quite some years. So the high school population's growing. That creates a challenge a little bit because we compete at the same time as the high school kids, right? So we don't often get the crowds that we would maybe get if they weren't competing, or sometimes when we do have a date where they're not competing. But just encouraging people to come, and you might not understand what's going on if you've never been to a wrestling match, but people at matches are generally pretty friendly, right? And they want people to understand what's going on. And wrestling wants new people to be watching. Wrestling wants to engage new people. Wrestling talks about it all the time. So you come to a match and you may not know exactly what's happening, but if the person next to you is wrestling in their seat a little bit, they probably do. And just ask them. I'm sure they'd be happy to explain it.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, you're going off at the same time that the high schools are going off as well. So it's tough because you want to get people out to the events, but they're supporting their kids where they are and whatnot. So what do you do to try and bridge that gap? Because obviously in recruiting, you want to be out there too at those matches. So if you're having matches at the same time, fans are divided between the two, and at the same time, recruiting wise, it's not as easy. So how do you take something that can be adversity and turn it into an opportunity, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, we look at dates. One of the things that was unique that we did last season was we wrestled a dual meet at Hilton High School out in Rochester. So we competed with Cornell
Yeah.
at Hilton High School, and we sold out their gym. It was standing room only. We had 1,700 people there for that event. So, finding a date and getting a team that's in a similar market with guys that may be from that local market is big, right? So like we have a number of guys on our team from New York State, and they did as well at the time. So things like that, right? When you have a connection to somebody on the team is helpful, or they're just from your area. So the families and the friends of the guys on our team, they do a great job of getting to our matches. So for me, it's about continuing to extend that community, right? And making sure that people in the community know there's local athletes here competing. And, maybe they're from the Binghamton area, maybe they're from Syracuse or Rochester or, Albany, but they're homegrown kids that are competing against the best guys in the country. We wrestle a lot of the best teams in the country. So you're getting to see really great wrestling. In our dual meets that we had this year, pretty much every event we competed at in the event center had a number of nationally ranked athletes, right? So you are watching the best guys in the country compete right here in our market.
Yeah, and you spoke about it as far as, having local homegrown talent. When I'm looking at this team and I'm going through this pretty hefty roster, we have Mount Sinai, New York, and we have obviously some Pennsylvania, some Connecticut, and other pieces. We have Tallahassee, Florida, but when it comes to the state of New York, we have Mount Sinai, we have Sequoia, we have Ovid, New York, we have Bolivar, New York, Lelleville, Cornwall, Saranac, as well as I want to make sure I hit everyone. Binghamton, obviously, Syracuse, New York, Port Chester, New York, Brooklyn, New York, Hilton, New York, Buffalo, as well as Central Valley and Chittenango and Governor, New York, Governor, New York as well. If I said that wrong, my apologies. But yeah, so there's a lot of different pieces of New York State, along with some Northeast, some Pennsylvania, New Jersey, like I said, and then there's Virginia and there's Florida sprinkled in there. Just what that means to you, like you said, that you can come to our matches and see homegrown talent. The overwhelming majority of your roster is from the state of New York, and not just one part, but literally all over New York, in the New York, in the borough area, as well as plenty of upstate pieces in all different parts of upstate, including right down the road in Binghamton itself. Just what that can do for your base. And then secondly, I'd love to hear the balance of finding student athletes locally, as well as finding student athletes from the Northeast and from all over the country, in some cases like Virginia and Florida.
Yeah, so our roster is primarily built of New York State guys. New York is a good wrestling state. There's a lot of successful athletes that come from New York, and we have to continue to do a good job of keeping the best athletes from New York in New York, right? We have that opportunity for them. There's not there's not a ton of schools in the state that have Division I wrestling. Buffalo, us, Army, Cornell, Hofstra, Long Island University. Hopefully I didn't miss anyone there. So it's not like we're competing against 50 different schools. We have to do a good job of keeping the best New York kids in New York. It's beneficial for a number of reasons. Like we talked about, it makes sure that there are people that live close by that can be at our matches. They're around to support their kids. But when we're looking at recruiting, you have to focus at the national level as well. And we have to make sure that we're bringing in talent from anywhere we can bring talent in from. And that's something that has changed a little bit since I've been here. Our roster has less New York guys now probably than when I started. We have started to reach a little bit more into New England, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and elsewhere. Like you said, we have Florida represented on our roster. We have Montana represented on our roster. Next year, we'll have Colorado represented on our roster. So it's about finding the right guys that are the best guys that fit what we're looking for here. We have in terms of wrestling team, we have a smaller roster than most Division I programs. We have a tight team. There's a lot of talk nowadays about the transfer portal and all the changes in college athletics, and knock on wood here, I haven't had anyone in my office yet saying, hey coach, I want to go in the transfer portal this spring. We didn't have anyone leave into the transfer portal last year. When we bring our athletes in, we spend time with them, we make sure they're comfortable here, and we create relationships with them that make them want to stay here, even after having a tremendous level of success. They continue to maintain their presence within our roster instead of coming in and saying, hey, I need to look at a bigger school. And hopefully none of that changes here after this podcast airs. But I think we do a really nice job of that.
Well, and you just said you try to make sure they're comfortable and you connect to them. How do you kind of fine tooth comb the recruiting? Because you're looking for good students, right? Binghamton University is not an easy school by any stretch of the imagination. So you need people that are academically going to go to class and do what they need to do and get their grades and keep them up and all of that. So you have the academic side and then you have the athlete side, but you have to fine tooth comb things to essentially find good people. And I think, and I've talked to coaches this year about it, where they've said, we looked at strictly talent, and I'm not going to do that from here forward because it blew up in their face. And so when you're looking at talent and you're looking at academics, you want that. Obviously, you want somebody good in the classroom and good when it comes to a wrestling match. But at the same time, when you're looking to build a culture and you're looking to build a community and a team that is truly together and supportive of one another, you have to be very careful about who you bring in. How do you fine tooth comb this? What are some of the things that you look for, or maybe the formula that you put together? Because when you say, hey, nobody transferred out last year, nobody transferred coming in, when you look at that and say no one's been using the transfer portal, that's not something that happens by accident. So how do you more than coincidentally get the right people? Because you might stumble upon somebody where it's like, oh, it just worked out. But when you don't have people jumping into the transfer portal, that says something about the culture of your program. So bring me into how you really try to seek to go between the lines when you're recruiting.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's less about me, right? It's coaching college athletics is about we, right? It's about the team. It's about obviously us as coaches and the leadership that's provided, but I trust my athletes. I have a number of guys that are older. I have a number of guys that are very successful and they understand how to be successful. And when we're recruiting athletes, I rely on them, right? How'd they fit in? Did you like them? What did they want to do when they stayed over, right? What are they asking about? What are they trying to do? Do you feel like they'll fit here, right? Because
Yeah.
the guys in the team, they know better than we do when you pare it down to that stuff, right? When you talk to a coach or a parent or a kid, they're going to tell you how great they are. I have great grades. I'm a great wrestler. I'm the hardest worker, right? Everyone's the hardest worker, right? Everyone will tell you I'm the hardest worker in the room. I do everything right. And those are the things you're coached to say when you're being recruited. But what are you saying when you leave after dinner and you go back to the team house? And what are you trying to do? Where are you trying to go? What are you talking about? What are you focused on? And I rely on the guys on my team, right? They want people here that they are comfortable with and feel like have similar goals. And we've come a long way in that department since I became the head coach here. I don't worry about what my team's doing outside of when we're in the wrestling room, and that's a testament to them. And every time we bring a recruit on campus and I meet with them before they leave and I meet with their parents, the first thing I ask them is, did the team treat you okay? Right? Did my guys treat you okay while you were here?
Yeah.
And we've lost recruits to other schools, but I've never heard from anybody, whether it was the recruit or the parents, that we lost them because of the way they were treated while they were here. And I think that goes a long way. Parents want a great education for their kids. Parents want to feel good about their kids being in a safe environment where they're going to grow as a student and a wrestler. And that's really what we try to, provide to them. So that's, it's not just about me and my staff, it's about my team.
Yeah, coming here from Kyle Borshoff, the head wrestling coach at Binghamton University in this edition of the Bearcat Breakroom. You talk about recruitment. I want to go back to your history and really where, I mean, everything started. So we're going to Tarantino this and go all the way back to Pittsford, a suburb of Rochester, New York. Let's go back to that Rochester area. Let's go back to the home of the garbage plate. And when did wrestling start for you? When did you get into it? When did you realize that you liked it? And those could be two different times, but how did you get into wrestling and how did you really fall in love with the sport?
Yeah, I got into wrestling with my brothers in the living room, right? I had two brothers. I had an older brother and a younger brother, and you start, wrestling. Just it's something natural you do. Like little kids, they fight, right? Or they wrestle or they race each other. I got two little kids now, and it's all they do.
Yeah.
And that's my dad wrestled, and it kind of started in the living room, right? And it started outside in the backyard. And then it just so happened that the youth wrestling coach lived on my street. So one of my neighbors, his name was Fred Kemp. And Fred actually told my mom, one day he said, "Hey, you should get your kids into wrestling." And my dad had wrestled actually at Binghamton, and before that at Irondequoit High School in Rochester. But Coach Kemp really sold my mom on getting me and my brother Jason out for wrestling. I think after watching, I'd run around the neighborhood, I'd climb my neighbors' trees, I'd jump out of their trees, I'd find frogs at their houses and stuff. I was kind of a wild kid, right? And he saw that and realized, like, hey, take that energy and get the kid wrestling. And I started doing it when I was, I guess, 8. And me and my brother Jason started wrestling at the same time.
Yeah.
And we just showed up, and we were wild kids, and the coach called us Clue and Less. So together we were Clueless. That was our nickname for the first year we wrestled. And we were, good right away, just, effort and being very active kids. So that's how I got into it. Coach Kemp sold my mom on it. Once my mom was sold, then my dad got involved. And Coach Kemp and my dad were my wrestling coaches for probably the first, if I started when I was 8, probably like the first 6 years of wrestling. And we started traveling all over the state. We started traveling through Ohio and Pennsylvania and just wrestling everywhere we could. I loved it. I went to wrestling camp in the summer. Right? I never went to fun camp. My little brother went to Camp Corey, where they do, fun stuff, and they lived in cabins, right? And I was at wrestling camp, getting better at wrestling and getting to watch really good wrestlers and spend time around them. And that's really where it started for me, right? Just happened to grow up in the right place on the right street and had a neighbor that got me involved. And
Yeah.
it was something I worked hard at, but I was always good at it. I was naturally, I think, a bit gifted in a number of ways that are beneficial to wrestling. And once you start to have success in something, it makes it easy, right? Like, I want to do more. And then when you lose, you get really pissed, right? Why did I lose? Now I'm pissed, right? And I remember all my losses, but they made me better, right? And that was kind of the deal. And from when I was 8 until I think I stopped competing around when I was 24, 25 maybe was the last time I competed. And it was always just, I loved to compete. I loved the one-on-one aspect of wrestling. It's you versus me. It's you versus me, and we'll find out who's better. Doesn't matter what the guy on the internet's writing. Doesn't matter what the person on TV says, right? It's you versus me, and we're going to find out who's better right now. And that's what I always liked about wrestling. I got to control it. And if I lost, it's because of me. If I won, it's because of me. And that's something that's kind of cool about our sport. And I'm also, I'm not a huge guy, right? So wrestling has the opportunity for people that are 150 pounds to compete at the highest level of your sport. And that doesn't exist in everything. You don't see a lot of 5'8", 150 pound people in the NFL and the NBA and things like that. You see them all over wrestling.
Yeah, and being 5'8", a card carrying 5'8"er, that's I can respect that for sure. I can also say, not on your level by any stretch of the imagination, but my cousin Jeff had me over to his house years ago, and he said we're gonna wrestle because he loved wrestling, he loved all that stuff, and I beat him consistently, and he kicked me out of his house. So, and he was older than me, and thought that he could have me. And yeah, after a while, I just got to a point where I was like, and I beat him, then I beat him, and then I beat him. And he's like, you need to call your mom. You have to go home. So I can fully appreciate being 5'8" and scrappy. But I want to go to your dad because you mentioned him, Tim Borshoff, 1976 graduate from Binghamton University, inducted into the Hall of Fame for the Bearcats in 2001. You said once your mom was sold, then your dad got involved. So it sounds like your dad kind of hands off, wanted this to be your thing and not force it upon you. What can you say about your relationship with your father, Tim, and just what it means to you to be coaching at the university where he's a member of the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. Family for me has always been really everything, right? Like I said, my brothers wrestled with me. We all went to the same college. All three of us wrestled at American University.
Yeah.
My dad coached all of us growing up. And my dad was at every wrestling match that we had forever. And if we were wrestling at different places, one of my dad or mom were at one place and the other one was at the other. So it was really, honestly, a family affair for us once it started happening. Um, and it's funny, right? As I'm growing up and my dad was coaching me and he's teaching me wrestling and he would wrestle with me every now and then, right? And there's still this like period of time where it's like, well, it's now flipped, right? Like now it's not my dad can no longer beat me in wrestling. And um, it was that funny relationship where it kind of went all the way through. He coached me as a little kid. Eventually we're kind of like the same size and he's getting older and I'm getting stronger, right? And um it was just this funny relationship that we had that was about wrestling. And my dad got inducted in the Hall of Fame at Binghamton. I was a little kid when it happened, but I still remember going to the events and listening to him make the speech right here in the West Gymnasium actually at the time.
Yeah.
And he and I now a couple years ago I got inducted into the Section 5 Wrestling Hall of Fame. And then I was able to I nominated my father and he was inducted subsequently into the Section 5 Wrestling Hall of Fame. So I think it's a cool relationship that was full circle. He coached me, he taught me everything he knew. I kind of surpassed what he was able to do. I watched him get inducted to a Hall of Fame. He watched me get inducted into a Hall of Fame. And then I got to watch him get inducted into that Hall of Fame, right? So that was something really neat. And I really value those memories. And it's something I'll always think back on. And I'll never forget those special celebrations we've been able to have.
Well, and I think it's cool too that he became a Hall of Famer. You're a kid, then you grow up, you get in the Hall of Fame, and then like you said, you nominated your father.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to bring it all truly full circle, like you were saying, to go back to your playing days at American University for the Eagles. You're 3-year captain, 3-time NCAA qualifier, 2-time All-American in 2009 and 2010, and you are a 4-time EIWA place winner and a 3-time World Team Trials qualifier, which is incredible. I mean, when you reflect on that, do you feel like I mean, knowing the type of competitor that you described yourself, I know that I'm going to say all this stuff and you're going to say, yeah, but I lost this match on November 25th at this time. But I mean, when you reflect on your playing career now that it's over and you're coaching, do you look fondly upon that? Do you have memories that you reflect on that you can kind of just bring to the forefront of your minds and have that, kind of old movie reel playing, so to speak? Do you have those moments you appreciate?
Yeah, there are, right? And there's you, or at least I have realized it more as time's gone on, right? So in the moment when it happens, you always want more, right? I wanted to be a national champion. I wasn't, right? So it was like at the time I was pissed off. I was frustrated. Why didn't I get it done? And then as the time moves forward, right, and you look back and you say, yeah, well, I ended up as a two-time All-American, and honestly, I wasn't recruited by hardly anybody, right? So I exceeded all expectations I think that existed for me in the sport of wrestling, except for the expectations that I had of myself. And that's something I try to pass on to my student athletes. Whether you were the best guy in high school or not, it doesn't matter, right? There's moments that I remember that were team moments that I had a unique part of. There's those individual moments, right? The matches that I won to become an All-American. At the NCAA championship, we call it the blood round, right? So the blood round, you win and you're an All-American, and you lose and you're not, right? So certainly those two matches, my junior and senior year, that I was able to win to be an All-American, I remember them very, very clearly. I remember the things my coaches said to me before the matches. I remember the actions that happened during the matches, and they do stand out. And it's something I'll remember forever. I was lucky to be able to have good coaches. I was lucky to be able to have a good support system. And I was lucky to have the success that I had, because there were a lot of guys that worked really hard and they did things right. And for whatever reason, I won. And when I'm coaching my student athletes, I try to give them that confidence, right? There were things that I did that in my mind, I believe made me better than the people I competed against. And that doesn't have to be the same thing, right? For my athletes, maybe it's not the same exact thing it was for me, but you have to have that confidence. Why are you going to win in this moment when there's a lot of pressure and you're competing against someone that's ranked in the top 10 in the country? Why are you going to win? Is it because you practiced harder? Is it because you ate better? Is it because you lived a cleaner life outside of, socially what you're doing? And you have to have something that you look at and say, I'm going to win because of this. The world team trial stuff was neat. Right after I finished college, I was coaching right away, and I was still competing a little bit in freestyle and Greco-Roman wrestling, and I got to wrestle some really incredible guys. And I did well enough to qualify for the trials a few times, and I got to wrestle in some major events. But even cooler than that, I got to coach one of my athletes in Slovakia at the Junior World Championships a few years ago. So that's something I never was able to do that as an athlete. And he was a better athlete than me, right? And that's the goal. As a coach, you want your players to be better than you were. Figuring that out is right. It's not as easy as you'd hope it to be, but that's kind of what that experience helps me do.
Yeah, and like you said, having so many experiences and so many amazing things that you've had the opportunity to do and wanting to pay it forward here with Kyle Borshoff in this edition of the Bearcat Breakroom, Binghamton University head wrestling coach here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora and our exclusive multimedia marketing partnership. After you finished up your playing days, like you said, you jumped on staff. You were there at your alma mater of American University for 5 years and became the head assistant coach for the final 4 seasons of that. How did the transition happen of leaving your alma mater at American and coming over to Binghamton University? Your father obviously had that connection, so you knew all about Binghamton, but you coming to Binghamton, paving your own way, and now, as we look at the fact that you are in your ninth season with the Bearcats and seventh season as the head coach of the team, how did that transition happen from American University to Binghamton University?
Yeah, that was my brother Jason. My older brother Jason was coaching here. So he and I were really close growing up. We were a year apart, and we wrestled together our whole lives. We both went to American. We were roommates. We lived together the whole time we were there. We wrestled together, and then we both finished in the same year. So we both finished competing in 2010. He immediately got a job here at Binghamton with, at the time, Pat Popolizio was the head coach. My brother Jason was the assistant coach. I immediately started coaching at American with my former head coach, Mark Cody. And when I had a contract renewal coming up, I was talking a lot with my brother Jason, and he kind of told me, he's like, hey, listen, one of the other assistant here, we're pretty sure he's going to be leaving. He's going to be taking a job at another university. Position's going to be open. And I kind of jumped at that opportunity to spend some time, right? I'd grown up with my brother. We competed together, and then we got to coach together. And that was neat. And we coached together here for a few years, and it was awesome. I lived with him for a year when I moved up here, and we got to spend time together as adults in our professional lives coaching wrestling, right? And that was something that was very unique. It was a lot of fun for me. It was something I looked forward to doing someday, and we were able to do that. So I would have to say that the catalyst for me to end up here and not knowing I'd be the head coach here, that was it. Getting a chance to work with my brother Jason.
And then how did we transition you into head coach? Like you said, you didn't come to Binghamton expecting to be the head coach. So bring me into the dominoes that fell that created that.
Yeah, so there, I started coaching, assistant coach, I guess in 2015. In the fall of 2017, my boss, the head coach, stepped down from his role. He took a new job, doing something outside of coaching, and this role opened up, and it was December. So that's during the wrestling season. And the athletics director at the time, Pat Elliott, brought me into the office, and I told him, I said, I can do this. I can do this. I can run the program. I can do this job. I can do it successfully. He said, well, what do you need? And my brother Jason had actually left the year before. And I said, well, I need to bring my brother back, right? So he said, okay, what do you need to do that, right? And we talked through the specifics, the logistics, the finances of bringing back my brother. And he said, okay, that's, done. Let's do it. We'll bring him back. What else do you need? And we talked through some of the other things I needed at the time. And Pat was great in that whole transition at a really challenging time for the program. And a week later, we were on a plane to Florida. The guys were gone when this happened. They were out of town. We were headed to Florida, and we wrestled, I think, 4 matches down there, and we won one of them, and we got smashed in 3 other matches. And one of our best guys didn't make weight. One of our other best guys got sick, and that was a tough week to be away. And then we got back to town, and we regrouped, and I think we won like our next 6 or 7 straight matches. And to the point where we were having success, right? From a really bad situation, a tough, challenging situation mid-season, to having a lot of success. And, Pat, I think, saw what was happening. And I was fortunate to end up no longer being the interim head coach after that season and being named as the head coach. And, the next year we had another good season, and we've done a lot of things over the past 7 seasons that have never happened before here. We're beating nationally ranked teams. We're sending 4 guys to the NCAA championships every year. We had 5 academic All-Americans that were just announced for the first time in program history. We had 1,000 APR score, which, right, we're digging into the weeds of the NCAA now, but it never happened before for this program. So just a lot of positive things. And I was a little bit lucky. But I jumped at the opportunity to be lucky.
I love that. I jumped at the opportunity to be lucky. And they say that luck comes from really just being prepared. When they say, like, how does this person seemingly get lucky all the time? And they say, that labor, that just purposeful steps that you take, that people wonder, like, how do you get so lucky? And it's like, well, if you open yourself up to different things, if you put yourself in good positions, if you continue to learn and grow, if you network, if you don't burn bridges, if you, try to advance yourself in areas where you need work, and then you hone the talents that you have, there's a reason why people look lucky. And I like that you said you jumped at the opportunity to be lucky. When someone knows nothing about wrestling, okay, they don't know styles, like you talked about Greco-Roman and this and that. When we're coming, and let's say looking at a match, we're coming to a match, never been to a Binghamton University match before, and I'm coming to a wrestling match, and I'm bringing a bunch of people never seen wrestling before in their lives, and we all sit down. How would you describe what we're about to see? How would you describe the different styles, and what do we need to know in a typical wrestling match in order to fully understand what's happening?
Yeah, well, we have 10 weight classes, right, ranging from 125 pounds to heavyweight, right? And heavyweight is a maximum of 285 pounds. So you're going to get to watch 10 individual matches throughout the dual meet. Every match, is essentially independent from every other match, and each match can earn the team points.
Yeah.
These matches happen back to back, right? So 125 wrestles, match ends, there might be a minute break, 133 wrestles. So it's a high pace, efficient. There's not a ton of break times. You're going to constantly be watching things happen, right? And the basic idea of wrestling is try to put someone on their back, right? You hold them on their back, you
Yeah.
pin them, the match ends. You could be down 14-0. You throw your opponent on their back, you pin them, you win. So if you're watching wrestling and you don't know what's going on, typically what you're looking for is, okay, is someone on their back? Yes, they're probably losing, right? Is someone flat on the ground with their face on the mat? Yes, okay, they're probably losing, right? So wrestling takes place in essentially three positions: the neutral position, where both athletes are on their feet working to take the other opponent to the ground. And then there's the top and bottom positions, where when you're on top, the advantage position, you're trying to figure out, how do I put this person on their back? The person that's on the bottom position is trying to figure out, how the heck do I get up off the ground, right? How do I stop this person from holding me down on the mat? And that's basically it, right? You see different guys do different stuff. There's throws. Our 174-pound athlete this past year, Dimitri, he grew up doing judo. He does a lot of throws. He's attacking their upper body. He's exciting to watch. He's throwing people. It looks kind of dangerous, but he's been doing it forever, so it's not all that dangerous. You got some guys that take a lot more leg attacks, right? They're essentially they're shooting, they're attacking an opponent's leg, they're picking it up in the air, they're sweeping their feet out, they're trying to knock them down to the ground. Anyone that's ever watched the UFC or MMA at this point, which has done a tremendous job growing its audience, you're going to see a lot of what those guys are doing without the punches and kicks, right? So the controlling of opponents by holding them on the ground. A lot of what happens in the UFC is wrestling, right? So you're going to see familiar positions if you've ever watched an MMA fight anywhere. There's just not the violence of the punching, kicking type situations.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, obviously, like you said, there's things that you can walk right into and fully understand. That's a good position to be in. That's not. Do you have a favorite move or a favorite style that you've done, or that maybe one of your student athletes did this season? Do you have like a favorite thing that you can pull out and say, I know you mentioned one of your student athletes, but is there something that you've done or that they're currently doing where you thought that style, that technique, that signature, that piece of their game is just really unique, and or the way that they do it might not be a totally unique style, but there's a little nuance that they put into it, something special that you've seen them, pull off something very intricate. Is there one that you can go back to either from being a coach or being a student athlete?
Sure. Well, I'll mention one thing quickly. The NCAA championships just happened, and a wrestler from Nebraska found himself in the unfortunate situation of being spladled in the NCAA quarter or semifinals, and he just made his rounds on Barstool Sports, and he was on that NFL player that does the show on ESPN. He was on their shows, right? And he's in this move called the spladle or the banana split, where your legs are pulled behind your head, and that's my favorite wrestling move. I think it's hilarious to do it to somebody. And this guy, he's probably the most famous guy in wrestling right now on the internet because it happened to him on ESPN in the national quarters or semifinals. But yeah, there's things like that. I was a big fan of moves like that were kind of fun to hit. As I mentioned, my 174-pounder Dmitry Gamkrelidze is a judo guy. He does a lot of throws. He's fun to watch. He's exciting. Another guy in the team, Brevin Casella, our 165-pounder. He's like 6'1" or 2", super skinny, really tall. Most of the guys he's wrestling are a half a foot shorter than him, and he's incredible on top. He rides these people. I mean, it's like, have you ever seen one of those movies where like they get a tiny net thrown on them and they like can't get out of the net? That's kind of Brevin, right? He doesn't let you go. He controls you from everywhere. It's impossible to get away from him. So there's a lot of things about wrestling that are unique because you get different body types, right? And wrestling styles make matches, right? The idea of like A beats B, B beats C, C beats A, couldn't be truer than in the sport of wrestling. And a lot of it has to do with the way your body is built and the different leverages and positions you can utilize. Because when you're half a foot taller than somebody else, there's a lot of different things you can do that they're not able to do. And you see that, if you watch our team, you'll watch a guy like Brevin, and you can see that just total domination on the mat. You watch a guy like Micah Rose on our team, and Mike is very good on his feet. He's quick. He's explosive. He's always keeping guys off balance. People back away from him a lot because they're afraid he's going to, blast through them and take them down. So you see a lot of different stuff when you're watching our team compete. And that's something I think that's unique to the sport of wrestling as well. Like no two matches typically end in the same way. A lot of tactical differences.
And nothing like getting to mention Spladle while we're talking
Spladle.
here on the show.
The Spladle.
So Kyle
Spladle's the best.
Kyle Borshoff here with us, the head wrestling coach, Binghamton University, in this edition of the Bearcat Breakroom. Before we jump into something called Rapid Fire, where you and I get to put each other on the hot seat and ask questions that could have something to do with wrestling or nothing to do with wrestling. Before we go there, I want to go to this season. This past season for Binghamton University's Bearcats wrestling program has seen you get to go to a bunch of different parts of New York, as well as going out to Las Vegas, Nevada, when you were in the Cliff Keen Las Vegas Wrestling Invitational, as well as seeing you most recently in Kansas City, Missouri for the NCAA Wrestling Championships. I want to get into the EIWA and just the difficulty of being in the EIWA and what that wrestling sphere does specifically within the EIWA. So just what you could say about the level of competition that you have there within that, and then how you wrapped up at the NCAAs and your overall takeaways as the NCAAs just wrapped up a little over a week ago for you. So your thoughts on the EIWA as well as how the team finished off in the NCAAs.
Yeah, so one of my goals since I've been here has always been to continue to wrestle the best teams we can, regardless of where it happens or who it is. And we try to get out to events like Cliff Keen, where you're going to see a number of the top athletes in the country. We wrestle a number of nationally ranked teams in dual meets, and ultimately we do it to prepare for the EIWAs and the NCAA championships. The EIWA is the largest wrestling conference in the country, and it's one of the best wrestling conferences in the country. So really in wrestling, you're looking at the Big Ten. The Big Ten dominates the landscape of our sport.
Yeah.
And then after the Big Ten, you have our conference and the Big 12 and the ACC, kind of all right there, similar levels. And I guess to put it in perspective, heavyweight, so the heavyweight class from our conference took the top 8 guys to the national championships this year. And the reason they took the top 8 guys to the national championships this year is because all 8 of those guys were ranked in the top 28 in the country. So you got 8 guys in our conference, all in the same weight, all ranked in the top 28 in the country. The EIWA is extremely deep. We have, usually between 4 and 8 nationally ranked guys at every single weight class. I think we qualified 63 athletes to the national championships this year, which was, I think the Big Ten had the most, and then us in the Big 12, I think we're right there at the second most athletes. So in order to prepare for that event, we have to wrestle the best guys in the country. Because if you don't, and you show up and you're unprepared, you get your butt kicked. So the EIWA Conference is incredible. The EIWA Championships is always a really great event to go to and watch. Next year it will be different. The Ivy League has decided to split away from the EIWA. So in the past, all of the Ivy League schools have competed with us. They're now forming their own conference. So they'll compete in the Ivy League. The EIWA will go from 17 teams down to 11 teams. But it's still going to be a very competitive conference. We have Lehigh, Army, Navy, us, American University, Bucknell, Drexel, Hofstra University, Sacred Heart, Long Island University, and Franklin and Marshall. Hopefully I hit everyone. So it's a great event. Prepared us well for the national championships. Like I mentioned earlier, we sent 4 of our athletes out to nationals. We had 3 of them each win 2 matches out there. One of them finished in the top 12 in the country. 2 of them finished in the top 16 in the country. And just continuing to look for growth and improvement at the national championships.
Yeah. And I appreciate the background in the EIWA as well, and what that's going to look like as we step toward the future, and a winning record for this season, to make note of this as well, for wrestling overall at Binghamton University, 9-4. And in the EIWA, that you say is such a difficult conference, and really hanging with those other conferences out there like the Big Ten, and like you mentioned, the ACC and so on and so forth, going 7-3 in the EIWA, and 5-1 at home, 3-2 on the road, 1-1 in neutral areas. So no losing record, be it home, away, or on neutral grounds, is another big plus to build off of for Binghamton University's Bearcats wrestling program. And with that being said, we're going to jump into rapid fire. You get 2 questions. I get 2 questions. Kyle, it could be about anything in the world, but you and I get to put each other on the hot seat, and enjoy this as a coach, because you never get to ask the question. So you get to ask the first question. What do you got?
What sports have you played all throughout your life?
Yeah, the one that I've been most connected to. I mean, I've thrown a pigskin around, I've thrown the football around, got to do something cool at the Ensley Center on pro day, when all the athletes left and whatnot, and the NFL scouts were watching them, lift and all that good stuff. We were waiting as the media, and I got to throw passes to one of the staff members there inside of the Ensley Center, which was really cool. But all my life, I have played basketball, and I've loved it. I mean, I retired from wrestling, leaving Jeff's house undefeated, as I told you earlier. And so I'm still down to do it. I'm still scrappy. I still have a lot of fun with it. But I would say, I mean, basketball is the one that has been a huge part of my life, and I challenge myself to really be able to shoot from anywhere, to have good handling skills. To this day, at 38 years old, if I mishandle something, if I take a half court shot and it's way off, I mean, I'm not the type of person going like I need to make all my free throws, but if I miss 5 half court shots in a row, that's unacceptable. If I miss the handle on a dribble, that's unacceptable. If I go under 8 of 10 at the charity stripe, that's unacceptable. So basketball has been an art for me, and I love it dearly, and I respect every sport. The one that I play the most is basketball. So I'll throw one at you here, Kyle. Let's see. Well, we've talked a lot about wrestling, obviously. So let's go to the world of movies. If you were jumping into a movie and you became a part of that movie, what movie universe, be it a real, like an account of someone's actual life or a totally fabricated fantasy, what movie world would you want to jump into and why?
It's tough. It's uh it's probably Lord of the Rings for me.
I like it.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, so I would definitely want to be hanging out Middle Earth. And I'm probably leaning towards like the ranger life. I'm not, I don't think I'm much of an elf type guy, and the hobbits seem like, I get it, they're heroes at the end of the day, but it
Yeah.
doesn't seem like it's a whole lot of fun to be a hobbit. But the rangers seem like they're the ones out there exploring the world, having a lot of fun. I'm a big fantasy guy. I like reading fantasy novels. I've always grown up playing like fantasy video games and things like that. So I've always been a big Tolkien fan. Brandon Sanderson's another author that I read a lot of books by. So if I had to jump into a world, it'd probably be that one, and hopefully I'd make it out alive. It seems like there's a lot of tough stuff going on there in Middle Earth, but I always thought it looked like a bit of fun.
Yeah, I can tell you that I've done impressions my whole life, and one of the ones that I do is Smeagol and Gollum. So I definitely have some fun, and I do it in my comedy, in I just kind of bring them together, and I have that like double personality talking about like things happening in today's world. So it's fun. So I can respect the Lord of the Rings. I think my little brothers Nico and Miguel will be very happy to hear you say that, as they brought me to the movies, and because of them I watched them and I owned them. So I could definitely roll in that world. That's a very adventurous, very vast, never ending world of like what's going to happen next, who's the next character. Didn't really like the Hobbit movies, like the Lord of the Rings movies,
Yeah,
but Lord of the Rings, I give it a lot of credit because it's one of those things where there's nothing like it. Like you
right.
can't go and say, and if anything looks like it, you're like, oh, they stole from, because Lord of the Rings just really in and of itself is such a very unique story. And man, I thought it was great. And I can go back there and like pull from pieces of that, even if you haven't seen the movie in like over a decade, the movies. So
Sure.
yeah, there's some good stuff there. I like that answer. That was not what I didn't know what to expect. I just kind of just broad scoped it, and now I'm like, okay, all right. So Kyle and I, when we're sitting hanging out, where a match ends, we can kind of stand there, and people are looking at us, and we got our hands on our chins, and they're thinking, oh, they're breaking down the match and different things, and we're sitting there talking about Lord of the Rings, which would be
Yeah,
pretty.
right. I mean, it's right. I watch a lot of movies, right? And Lord of the Rings, I think it'd be fun to live in that world. The other one, Clerks, and I would love just the Clerks world. So anyway,
Pretty similar worlds, almost the same. so so I like
very
it.
versatile.
Yeah,
Um,
real meat and potato type of thing.
yeah.
So what's your last one for me?
All right. What three sporting events would you like to go to that you've never, if you've been to some of the big ones, don't include those. Like three events you would love to go to that you've never been to before.
Okay. All right. I like it. So I would say ones that I haven't been to. So the Super Bowl, go Jaguars. So
Oof.
I was 4 points away, 5 points, I should say, because they lost by four. But I've covered. So my favorite team is Jacksonville. Whenever somebody asks me who my favorite team is, I wear it on my wrist every day.
Why?
So
Hold on. Why the Jag? Are you from New York? Where are you from?
I'm from Syracuse.
Okay.
I became a Jaguar fan. 1995, wanted my own team. Loved their logo, loved their colors. I was 9, and I love Fred Taylor. So I got a bunch of Fred Taylor stuff hanging out here. I actually have the first helmet and then like the most recent logo with the teal helmet side by side in my studio. And yeah, I mean, I was a fan since day one. Fred Taylor helped to keep that, make that a real thing for me. Mark Brunell, Jimmy Smith, Keenan McCardell, Kyle Brady, Marcus Stroud, Donovan Darius, Aaron Beasley, and so on and so forth. So Yeah, I mean it's pretty unique because I became a fan in the beginning and I had never been to an NFL game. And my first NFL game that I ever went to, I was covering it in the media. So went to it for free, had my badge, sat in the press room or press box, and then got to go downstairs and interview the players on my favorite team. So my first NFL game was a press box, media,
Wow.
interviewing the players in the locker room, which is a very unique experience for a first game. So, and I still cover them to this day. I'm hoping this will be year 14. I travel down and I do their games. I can do their road games. I do their home games. I've done the playoffs. And so we were 5 points out of the Super Bowl back in 2018, and there's a good chance I could have went to that. So I'm going to go ahead and say that. I'm going to say the women's Final Four because I've been to the men's Final Four. I'd like to go to the women's Final Four. I would love to do it this year because Caitlin Clark's in it. She's my favorite player. So I would say, well, hopefully in it. We'll see. But yes, I mean, high hopes of obviously we're here Tuesday morning, so y'all know what happened. But last year I wanted to go to the championship. So I would say the women's Final Four, I would say the Super Bowl, and a third. I've been to the World Series. I'm a Diamondback fan, and I brought my dad to the World Series this year. So, or this past year. So I would say, where haven't I been? I would probably pick the NBA Finals to see my Raptors go back. And it's going to be a trek because they're finally rebuilding, but I wanted to be at the 2019 NBA Finals. I was told as a kid that the Raptors would never win. Why do I like the only team that's not in America? They shouldn't even be a team because they're not playing in America, yada, yada, yada. Then when they won in 2019, I got some love, and I'm still, at this point, I'm still tracking 7,432 apology letters, boxes of chocolate, roses left on my doorstep. I thank like the three people that gave me credit, but there's an overwhelming majority of you that have still yet to acknowledge that you were wrong. So, I look forward to you doing that. But no, I mean, probably the NBA Finals with the Raptors, I would say.
I hear you on that. I'm a Blue Jays fan. So I grew up in Rochester, right? So I'm a Bills Blue Jays guy. People always ask, "Why are you a Blue Jays fan?" Right? And because I went to Blue Jays games my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah, because you saw Blue Jays games, and the Blue Jays were here in Syracuse forever with the
Hmm.
AAA team.
Yep.
So yeah, I get it totally. And I grew up liking the Blue Jays. That was actually the first game that I ever went to, MLB. My parents brought me up to Canada in the old Sky Dome, and we
Yep.
went to see Joe Carter put it on the Twins by a score of, I believe, 11-2. So I can appreciate that, which is now the Rogers Center, which I went to see the Diamondbacks playing a few years ago.
Nice.
My last question for you, Kyle, is if so, I want to stay with the fantastical world since we already went there. So, if you could have a superpower, let's say you had a set of three superpowers. So you are a character in a video game, right? You've in real life assumed these powers that you would have in a video game. What three superpowers would you like to have in today's world and why?
Man. Flight. Flight's always the one, right? You want to fly, right? I don't like flying in planes.
Yeah.
So I'd prefer to just be able to do it myself. So uh flight's one.
Okay.
All right. The second one would be um like the power to convince anybody of anything.
Manipulation.
Total manipulation. Ultimate manipulation plus flight. And the third one would be, well, if I could already fly, I could eliminate some of the other ones. It would be cool. Probably, man, I guess I would pair flying with being able to breathe and survive in outer space. So I'm going to fly
Okay.
with ultimate manipulation, and I could travel like intergalactically. Yeah, that'd be pretty sweet. I think I'm gonna go with those three, and I'd have a pretty fun time exploring the universe.
Yeah. Be able to go to any part of space, any planet, be able to
Yeah,
breathe, have the gift of flight to get there yourself, and have the power to manipulate whatever beings you find on planet.
that's right. Yeah, because that could get real shady, right? Like you end up somewhere and there's some aliens out there. You want to be able to be like, listen, no, I'm good. You're gonna go do this. I'm gonna do this, and it's done. Manipulated.
Well, and I think in the show that I'm currently watching on Netflix and finished season one, Three Body Problem is all about finding this alien race, knowing that they're coming, trying to prepare for them getting to planet Earth. And at that point, I feel like they would really need a Kyle Borshoff manipulation at
Yeah.
that to turn them around, to get them to somehow believe that they took a wrong exit, they have to keep going. So yeah, I mean, that was a really cool answer. I mean, I got to say this, Kyle. It's the first time that we've talked and we're hanging out here on the show, but I really look forward to what you're doing in the wrestling world. But selfishly, I also look forward to our conversations about the fantasy and superhero and power realm, which I think, they're going to be like, oh, you had dinner with Kyle? Yeah, we went and hung out, had some dinner. What'd you guys talk about? Did you talk about like wrestling mood, different thing? No, man, we talked about the X-Men. We talked about what we
Yeah.
want to see coming up
Do
here.
it.
So I think for a lot of reasons, Kyle, Binghamton got a gem there, and I am very much looking forward to diving into the wrestling as well as the fantastical world when we get some FaceTime as well.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. And like I said, thanks for having me on. This has been awesome. So good to meet you. Glad to talk with you. And I'd be happy to talk anytime about really anything. Listen, we can talk anything, right? I like wrestling. I like the fantasy world, but like I said, I'm a pretty easygoing person. I'll talk about anything, and that's what coaching is, right? You got to be able to relate to people, and I think that's what we're doing right now, right?
Yeah, is you got to be able to, when you are who you are and you're the same on and off the camera, there at a match, in practice, in whatever's going on in life, walking up and down the street, when you are who you say you are, and that people enjoy other things, that's you meet people where they are and you discuss different pieces with them and you really learn a lot about the world. And I think your student athletes, I mean, I think sitting there and being like, okay, what superpower would you guys have? You had the opportunity. You're going to get an answer from everybody because
Mhm.
everyone's thought of that either consciously or subconsciously. So I think exactly what we're doing right now is a great recruiting tool that you have, Kyle, in your ability to relate to people and go outside of typically just speaking on the sport and really getting to know the personalities of your student athletes. So recruiting pitch is right there, and it happened naturally for Binghamton University Bearcats wrestling and for their head coach, Kyle Borshoff. Kyle, thank you for this Bearcat break room, and I look forward to talking with you soon.
Thanks, Dan.